First of all, I really want to welcome you this evening and thank you for giving your time to join our Lewisham Leaders programme. This is one of the many sessions that we've been doing over the past few months, and we are focusing on the work that we do as counsellors and supporting our residents, because that is a really big function of what we do. But just want to thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you for giving consideration to becoming a counsellor. And we hope that we can sort of help you on that journey. And hopefully this evening will give you the opportunity to learn more, to ask questions and kind of decide if this is the right move, opportunity, or something you really want to do and engage with. So with that being said, let's bring up the slides. And also just to let you know that we are recording this. We'll probably be truncating the beginning and the question sections out of the recording, but it's just in case we need to provide it for someone. So, as I said, thank you. As I said, this evening is about supporting Lewisham residents, and that is at the foremost of what we do as counsellors. It's part. I always say that when we become counsellors, we must, even no matter how much time we spend in meetings in the civic suite and other places, we must remember it's our residents that have enabled, that voted for us, that have enabled us to be in a position where we are there to help and support, and knowing our communities and being out and about in our communities is key, but it's just one part of what we do in supporting our residents. May I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So I know that for many of you that are on this call, you know that casework is a primary function of what we do. It's one of the main ways that residents communicate with us about casework. It can be through different ways. It can be through, you could be out the shops if you're local to your ward and somebody comes up and speaks to you. They could be emailing, phoning, attending your counsellor's surgery. So, and there's also, don't wait for casework to come to you. If you see it, raise it, log it. But in doing that, you're supporting not only individual residents and families, but the area and the community as a whole. You can see from the images, one of the big things that we get is to do with fly tipping, could be to do with antisocial behaviour. There's a whole host of things that we'll pick up either through people logging and raising issues with us. Housing is another big area that we get a lot of casework on. But as I said, there's the things that you might see as you go out and about day to day in your ward or around where you live. And it is, if you see fly tipping, log it. If you see graffiti or sort of like posters, fly posting, etc., and stickers, just log it and raise it. It's another way for us to, as well, advocate for our residents. So sometimes we'll get, this is why we also do door knocking. I know that quite a few of you on this call have been out with us door knocking, and that's another way that we obtain casework. It's about speaking to people, hearing what the issues are for them. And it could be that the lighting on their estates in the main corridor isn't working. It hasn't been working for ages. They've logged it with repairs. It hasn't been done, and that's where you pick it up and help facilitate going through. And that way, you doing things and residents seeing that you have taken up their issues and dealt with it and it's been resolved is just one way of showing that you are listening and acting on what they're saying. We can't always give them, give them what they want, which could be like, I want a 4-bedroom house. We've got quite a high waiting list queue and those in temporary accommodation. But in responding to them and letting them know and keeping them up to date with how the casework is progressing and getting an answer, even if it's not the answer that they really would like, and doing it in a way that is polite, which is respectful, which shows that you have listened and that you can put it in a way that makes it more digestible and a little bit easier to take on board, but you're also being empathetic with their needs goes a long, long way. So, and it's really important that we always respond to casework, or whether it's through email or a phone call or on the doorstep, because, and you might feel inundated with a lot of work, but we just got to keep responding and working together to answer them. And sometimes it's a case that you might have to chase up, but it's down to the individual to make sure that you are managing that casework and that workload, and that you're responding to our residents who've got in touch with you, because that way they see that you are working and operating and advocating on their behalf. And that is, a key reason why that individual may have voted for you, because they want somebody who is able to understand what they're going through and be able to advocate on their behalf.
Brenda, I had some notes on this one and the next slide, so shall I jump in?
But yeah, sure. Thank
Okay.
you.
So just following on from what Brenda said, common casework themes are obviously housing is our biggest one across the borough, bins, parks and green spaces, and a lot of crime and ASB, antisocial behaviour at the moment. But it really differs where you are in the borough. So people who are in my ward in Evelyn will have different issues to say someone in Hillary's ward, Grove Park. But we will also have some common issues. In casework, it's not only the council that you have to deal with. It's we have housing associations. We have around 25,000 housing association homes across the borough. So that's Hyde, L&Q, people outside of the council. Thames Water, which Joan would probably tell you about, and Telegraph Hill. And then places like the GLA, TfL, and the police as well. Um, you know, and you can advocate for residents in different ways. In my ward recently, for example, we have an area of a new development that has a lot of new small businesses in it who were struggling to get footfall and have people know about them. So we just organised a roundtable with all those businesses and the officers in the business teams at the council to see if we can find some solutions. That's a really effective way for you to be that bridge between the community you represent and the council. The managing the casework can be difficult, as councillors are now more accessible than they've ever been. It's very easy for people to contact their councillors, and especially when we've had austerity, cuts to council services, things have become more stretched, and people might find it more difficult to get in the hold of officers or get an issue resolved. We do have a casework system at the council where you can keep track of all of this, which makes it a lot easier to log and keep track of what you're doing. And just saying that casework is a big part of this, but counsellors aren't caseworkers. It's not 100% of the job you do. It is really important that you use your experiences within the community to influence policy and make sure people in your area are represented as well. That's me done. Jack, could we go to the next slide, please?
You again, Will.
So counsellor surgeries, many of you will know what this is. It is a drop-in space where counsellors are required under their counsellor contract to hold a surgery at least once a month. In my ward, we do 2 a month at the community centre and a library that we have. And then me and Rudy in Evelyn have also started doing school drop-off surgeries. So between 8:30 and 9:30 at our 2 primary schools as well, once a month. It's really good to have a surgery in a well-used community space, and make sure you're trying to reach those residents who you might not talk to that regularly. What you would find was when you're elected, there are some residents who you talk to a lot, but a lot of people who do have a lot of needs and need to be represented in the community, you might not hear from as much. So doing a surgery in line with a food bank like we do every 3rd Friday means that sometimes you pick up those people who might be struggling. And working with your ward colleagues is really, really important. And being able to have that communication between yourselves to make sure, one, you're not duplicating work, and two, you're doing the best for your ward. So regular catch-ups and having a good division of labour amongst your ward colleagues and you. So in Grove Park, if I'm right, Hillary, they take a month each to do the casework a year. So all the casework that comes to all three councillors, they do a month each. And then Telegraph Hill, with Joan, they have it on an issues basis. So someone will pick up, say, roads or ASB, and then another councillor will pick up those ones there. Me and Rudy do something similar in Evelyn, where I pick up the majority of housing cases, whereas Rudy tends to mop up the rest, because the housing cases tend to be about 2/3 of what we get in. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to this one, Brenda.
No, I think, as you said, that making sure that you communicate with your fellow ward councillors is really key. When I was in Deptford and we had like 2 new councillors, what we did is that we would use the session to be a time to come together so we could catch up. And then also it's about covering for each other, because one might be unwell, one might be on holiday. So you also need to work together so that you're covering those periods when somebody's not unable to do the surgery. But it is about trying to share the load and not make it on a first come, first serve. Like if somebody's quicker at getting to the emails for another, you still try and speak to each other and separate it out. I would say, so that there's not more burden on one than another.
Could I add something?
Mm.
Could I just say as well, I mean, obviously casework and being available to constituencies is a really key part of what we do. And it's also a very key part of, as Labour councillors, putting our values into action. So it isn't just the regular surgeries, it's like being creative. And again, it does depend on the nature of your neighbourhood. But some of the things we've done in my ward in Telegraph Hill, we have impromptu surgeries where we go along to community things, community days, we have stuff there. We've done street surgeries where we leaflet the night before and then say, put this up in your window if you want to speak. There's a lot of people that don't feel confident about contacting counsellors. So just the fact we advertise the surgery, or our telephone numbers, our emails, we have to be creative, I think, particularly in these hard-pressed times, to be as accessible as possible. So a little bit of creativity, but again, if you are to be, if you stand and you're elected, there will be hopefully a wider team of Labour group, which I'll speak about in a minute, who can actually give you advice and support on this as well. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, so we're moving on to community, which I'll take this slide. So I think, as I alluded to earlier when we started this session, it's really important to be out and about in your local community, to engage, and we've got to develop those relationships. They don't just happen overnight. So it's about visiting the local schools, going around the local businesses, seeing that there's a local business that's newly open, and stopping and introducing yourself, and sort of rotating round, so that you do that every now and then, that you stop in the shops, that you visit the schools, that you go to the community meetings, and just so that people get to know you and you get to know what's happening in your community. What are the local projects that are going on? What are the community groups that may be quietly getting on with what they do, and not being very vocal about it? So it's really important to develop those relationships in your local ward, so that you can be an advocate, not only with whatever the council is doing and proposing to do, but also to get feedback and to be able to listen, to be able to bring back that information, because it can help form policies, it can help form things that we are doing. Another thing that is really good to do is to do regular walkabouts. You could do that with your fellow ward councillors, especially if you don't know the wards a great deal, and that's how you can discover a lot of issues and organisations and what they're doing. But on your walkabout, not only are people seeing you and saying hello and good morning and afternoon to them, but also you can look out and see, where is their fly tipping, where is their abandoned cars? Where do you do with having like a community cleanup, for example? And there's lots that you can learn when you're doing a walkabout in your ward. Another aspect to being out and about in the community is to represent Labour. Remember, you are a Labour member, you're a Labour councillor, so you are representing Labour values in the local Labour Party, and it's always good to be able to translate and explain and talk to people about it if as and when the opportunities come up. And it's also good to, you know, if you have the opportunity and you haven't done it already, you know, join the school governing boards. Make sure you're going out to the tenants and residents associations as well, because they meet frequently in your ward. So it's good to be able to go and join their meetings, and that's another way where you can hear and pick up casework as well. And if there's any questions, you're able to answer, respond. If you haven't got the answer, take it away. You can ask somebody else for advice, or raise it so that you get the answer. But it's a good way to be out and about, and for people to get to know you and you to get integrated in the community, so that, you know, as I said, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, and you just have to keep working on it and building that trust and that communication, you know, between the different parts of our community. We've already mentioned about surgeries, and that's another way, as we said, for those who are not, you know, they want to see somebody face to face to discuss whatever issue they want to raise. And as I said earlier, it's important to then take action as well. But also, while you're going out and about, think about what you and your colleagues could be doing in the community. What support can you be lending to groups? Make sure that if there is a tenants and residents association, that at least one of you go, and that's back to sharing that workload as well, so that if at least one of you can go, or one of you can have that relationship with that tenants and residents association, and somebody else has another relationship with the youth club. Whatever way you choose to sort of divide that sort of building connections, and then you can introduce each other to the other opposite group, and that's one way of sort of getting integrated and getting to know those in our communities. And yes, I should also mention that if there are community sort of events, it could be a fun in the park, or community cleanup, whatever it is, go down, get involved, attend, you know, and speak to people and let them know that you're there and supporting them. And, you know, community groups, they do come in all shapes and sizes. You know, I've mentioned about the residents and resident tenants and residents associations meetings. You know, when you go to that and you go regularly, then as you pick up casework and issues, you'll be able to relay that back to the council, to the cabinet member, to your fellow ward councillors. You know, it mentions here about the carol services, or there might be an Eid event, or um, safer neighbourhood panels and ward panels and other community meetings. They tend to be at weekends, they might be in the evenings. So do try and engage with them and build that rapport, so that you become fully integrated in your community. And there's no shortcuts for doing that. It's about putting the time and the effort and making yourself available to go and attend these events as well. Thank you.
Okay, fine. Well, but as you can see, I think one of the most important things is to recognise that not only do we sign as a elected member a contract that we sign with the London Borough of Lewisham, that you dutifully sign and so on, but there is also a Labour councillor contract. And that sets out the expectations and requirements of a Labour councillor. Now, some of those are obviously going to be exactly the same as being a councillor, but there is if you like, an additional thing in terms of attendance of full council, for example. It is expected 100% attendance at full council. And in terms of committee meetings, to which you're assigned, obviously, you get an opportunity to put down your suggested areas that you have interest in, that you have experience of, because obviously we like to be able to use the skills of those who are elected. And there's an expectation of attendance of those, and a minimum attendance is 85% across the board. You know, that's where you really ought to be. I mean, obviously, if somebody has a hospitalization, a serious illness, and other family, serious family issues and so on, then obviously that comes into consideration. But you really need to do your best to attend all full council meetings, and the vast majority of your other committee meetings to which you are assigned. But as I say, you do get an opportunity to say at least the areas you'd like to be involved in. Now, what are you there for? Well, you're there to monitor performance against the targets that have been set. You're there to ask questions. You're there to make sure that you know what you're talking about. You know, the attendance at training, for example, if you're on planning, is that mandatory to attend planning training? Because I think one of the people earlier said about, you know, do you need legal training? Well, it's a quasi-legal situation you find yourself in, whether in licensing or in planning. And so it's important that you take advantage and do indeed attend those mandatory sessions so that you know, if you like, the ambit of what you are to do, and also the limitations. For example, in planning, you're not there as grand designs. If you ever watched that program, you are there to look at the planning regulations, the application, how that works, and to ask questions at the actual meetings, and to make sure you read the papers, read them thoroughly so that you can ask good questions. And that applies for any of the other select committee meetings, whether it's children and young people, safer, stronger, healthier communities. You know, really make sure you read that information so that you can ask pertinent questions, but also very importantly, listen, understand, and find out, do your research. So engaging with residents, where to consult them, there will be opportunities to do that on different activities that occur, ideas that are raised, plans that are put into place, consultations that are done on a ward-wide or borough-wide basis. Really make sure you know what your residents' concerns are with anything that's coming up, so that you can make the appropriate action, and also make sure that you give their voice to the council or at a particular committee meeting, for example. You need to contribute, what they say, effectively, but this also means in line with Labour group policy. Okay, you are there as a Labour councillor, and Brenda said a few moments ago, you are a Labour councillor. You are there as a Labour Party member who is now an elected councillor, and that is really important to remember. So checking and listening and making sure that you are attending Labour group meetings where a lot of the discussions will take place, debates and so on. But once something is agreed, okay, a briefing may be made by a cabinet member and then questions asked, and we're going to really, really strong debates. But once a decision is made, that decision is the one that we go with. Okay, and that is the line that we will take. And in that way, you make your contribution. But also to help the service priorities to think about what you found out. You know, other colleagues have mentioned about walking around your wards, finding out from community groups, attending the panel meetings for safer neighbourhood teams, attending school events and so on. You will find out a lot just by talking to people and finding out what their issues are and what their priorities are. Okay, and how that can be meshed into what the priorities of the Labour Council is, and also what we are aiming to do across a ward, across a borough, or across parts of a borough. And I think that's really, really important to link that back into Labour group policy. Clashes we may have when we have debates and so on, good, it's healthy debate. Okay, but at the end of the day, we must be in line with the Labour group policy, and that's really an important thing to remember. And I think I've covered that slide. I think there's another one. Is there for this one? Yeah, working. Okay. So we were saying earlier about how important it is about attending the full council meetings, they're mainly monthly. Okay, you get a full diary, so you can get them into your diary early on, get them in there, you know, red letter days, call it what you will, but make sure you get those in there. Now, you can ask questions of cabinet members through Labour group. You can ask questions of them when you see them. Okay, but you can also ask questions at a full council meeting. Personally, I tend to avoid that because I would rather speak on a one-to-one basis with a cabinet member if it's an issue that's coming from a ward that comes within their remit. Okay, but there is the option there. There will also be the opportunity to speak to motions which reflect the issues and concerns of the residents of the London Borough of Lewisham, what we look for, and those motions may come up through organisations, they may come up through your meetings with people in the area, community groups, churches, you name it. They may come up through that, and you may then put that motion together, seeking a second, and put it to Labour group first, and then it will be debated and see whether that motion then goes to a full council meeting. And at that, obviously, you will speak and either introduce the motion, you may be a seconder, you may also speak in favour of that motion. Okay, once that motion has been agreed by Labour group to go ahead. Now, there's a lot of committee meetings, okay? You don't have to go to all of them, which is a relief. But you actually are there to provide that scrutiny. You are looking into, you are investigating, you are checking. Okay? You are making sure that the information you have, you are satisfied with, hence the opportunity to ask questions in select committee meetings, or indeed in the quasi-judicial meetings, such as planning and licensing. And you would only be on one of those two, by the way, not both planning and licensing. And you will be very much required. You need to have read, as I mentioned earlier, that information, because you will not be able to provide effective scrutiny if you haven't read the information, if you haven't checked it, if you haven't thought about, do I need to ask a question here? And when you get the opportunity to do so, make sure that it's a question. You know, we're not doing speeches, we're asking a question that checks our role as scrutiny. We're there to challenge, but we're therefore equally to ensure that we can really make sure that that information is not only correct, but we understand it. And that is really, really key. And also another thing to look at is to make sure that we also look at the kind of other committees that we might want to be involved in. Finance, okay, staff's mention, there's all sorts of things there, and there is a wide variety there, and you will be guided as to the number of committees you will be on and how that kind of operates once you are elected. But it is extremely important that you are there as somebody who has read, inwardly digested, misuse the words of St. Paul, and therefore have made and had an opportunity to create questions that you will ask, which add to the information that has been given, and make sure that that role of scrutiny is really carried out effectively. Thank you.
Could I just raise one other point, Hilary?
Yeah.
So, just to say, one of the other committees we have, and it's because we have a directly elected mayor, and the directly elected mayor has their cabinet. So we have what's called an executive. And therefore, the rest of us who aren't on the mayor or the directly elected the cabinet, we're the scrutiny officers, as Hillary's explained. And one of the committees we have is overview and scrutiny. And this is made up of the chairs of the main committees, plus some representatives from the Labour group officers. And our role, even though at the moment we're all Labour councillors, our governance role in terms of Lewisham Council is to scrutinise the reports that go to Mayor and Cabinet as well, and to raise any queries of them. And there are some powers which we can what's called call in. We can ask the Mayor to reconsider a decision that's been made, or we can actually try and influence the Mayor and the Cabinet in advance on particular important issues. So it's an interesting one to get your head around when we're all of the same party. But this is to demonstrate as councillors, while we're Labour councillors, we do have responsibilities as general councillors. Thank you.
This one's back over to you, Joan.
Oh, right. Hi there. Hi, everybody. I'm not sure if you'll know me. My name is Joan Milbank, and I am currently the chair of Lewisham Labour Group, just about finishing my 7th year, believe it or not, and about to enter my 8th. There we are. Hopefully that's a vote of confidence. I've been a councillor since 2010, and I represent in Telegraph Hill. So I just want to say first, if you decide to stand, if you get selected to contest an election as a Labour candidate, and indeed, if you get elected as a Labour candidate, you will automatically become part of Lewisham Labour Group, which I want to speak a little bit about. But I just want to say before that, the point to bear in mind is that you are a Labour representative. You are going to be the rep and the guardian, one of them, and the promoters of Labour values in actions in Lewisham and in the ward that you actually represent. And it's important to remember this, because if we're honest, it's extremely unlikely you would get selected as an independent as an independent candidate if you didn't have the banner of Labour around you. Because apart from the name recognition, you've also got money that comes with it in terms of organising a campaign, which hopefully leads to your election, and also general help from the party overall. So it's very important we recognise that you're standing for Labour and you will be a member of the Lewisham Labour Group. So in terms of Lewisham Labour Group, this is the chance where we can discuss things in kind of a bit of a raw state from a political point of view, because obviously there's rules and regs we have to follow as councillors. And once we get elected, well, obviously you are representing a cross-section of people, not just a particular interest group. But in Labour Group, which meets each month, sometimes we meet twice a month, depending on the issues that come up, it's our opportunity to have some honest, open discussions around a whole range of issues that affect us in Lewisham, how the national policy might actually influence, how we're going to handle that. And it's a place where we can have these open discussions, but it's open discussions which have to be kept confidential. You probably find a number of you will be, hopefully all of you will be active in your branches. Some of the questions you ask of your current councillors, they can't perhaps give you the detail that you want, because Labour Group has to be a confidential discussion. If people take stuff outside of the meeting without the consent of the mayor, who is the leader of Lewisham Labour Group, and Labour Group officers, you could drop yourself and Labour Group into a kind of a big problem. So, like I say, we meet monthly. You are expected to attend. We have a contract, Lewisham Labour contract, which is worked out across the whole of the borough. Copy of it here, going to be reviewed. You're going to be asked to sign it. You also sign a contract, well, not a contract, but you also sign an agreement to be a Lewisham councillor as well. And this sets out values and expectations of what we actually expect. How we run Labour Group is set out in what's called the Lewisham Labour Group Standing Orders. They're based on standard models coming from the National Labour Party, which we have some room to actually bring in some local variations, which we do when we review them each year. Each councillor will have a copy of the standing orders, and they set out how things are actually run and the processes and procedures in terms of how we run Labour Group and have our discussions. So, like I say, hopefully the role of the chair is to make sure that everyone who wants to speak can speak, and the meetings are conducted in a fair and inclusive way. But like I say, it is your opportunity in Labour Group to have some really quite hard discussion, not hard, but in-depth discussions, and have differences of opinion as well, because that's how also a number of us kind of work out a position by actually having these types of discussions. Right, but as Hilary implied, once we leave Labour Group, knowing what our position is, all Labour Group members are expected to adhere to the line that's taken by that meeting. There are occasions sometimes when we enter the council chamber, there can be things like matters of conscience. So, for example, let me give you an example. When there was the vote around the EU, whether we should stay in the EU or leave it, the European Community, that was deemed to be a kind of a matter of conscience. So, therefore, we were given a free vote. So, basically, you didn't have to vote with the line that the Chief Whip gave you. You could vote according to what you thought was the right issue. But I would say 99 times out of 100, when we go into a council chamber, we know in advance what the Lewisham Labour Group position is, and you will be expected to follow that position. There may well be a local issue where perhaps you feel a bit compromised. You speak to the whip in those circumstances, and ways can be found to allow members to possibly not vote on something so that they don't jeopardise their position within Labour Group, but also it gives them the freedom to say in the local community about things that they've done in a slightly different way. Your attendance at Labour Group will be monitored. At the moment, the rule is you're expected to attend at least 70% of Labour Group. You're also expected to attend other activities that Labour Group might organise. So as we lead up to the local elections in May 2026, we have monthly Labour Group organised and Labour Group attended canvassing sessions, door knocking sessions on a Monday evening. The current rule on that is you're expected to attend at least 50% of those. And like I say, this is actually monitored. Okay, the other thing I think just to say about Labour Group, you know, we have a bit of fun as well. We have our socials. We have a Labour Group assistant. Because we're such a large Labour Group, we're all Labour bar one at the moment. We have a full-time assistant who's there to offer advice and guidance and information. So, for example, if you feel you want to bring a motion or instigate a discussion or debate at Labour Group, there is somebody as well as your colleagues who can help you think about drafting stuff. So the only other thing I would say on this in terms of Labour Group, like I say, Labour Group, the important message to take away, it's our internal meeting. But also, as Labour councillors, you've got a very strong role within the branches, your local branches. So you are actually quite key in terms of making sure that the Labour agenda is kind of discussed within branches. And actually many councils also take quite a leadership role within local branches. It may not be the most ideal thing, but often that's the reality. Okay, I think there's another slide coming up. Right, okay, here we are. Oh, there we are on the local branches. Okay, so again, there's an expectation on Labour Group, on Labour councillors to attend their branch meetings to make sure they happen, etc., to play a key role, to give reports, whatever the branch requires. They could be brief written reports, they could be verbal reports, they could be both. To be involved in campaigning. So that's obviously, I mean, at the moment, the campaigning will be ramming up because obviously we've got elections coming up in just over a year's time. We had the general, well, last year, you know, we had lots of elections helping colleagues where there were by-elections in Deptford and other places, as well as the mayor election, as well as the general election. So Labour Group councillors are expected to get fully involved in that and to lead sessions as necessary. So really, overall, our role is to be part of, but also to help build a kind of a healthy, vibrant Labour Party locally. So another slide.
No, we're on to the Q&A now.
Okay, just one last thing just to say. I'm not sure if the information's come up before. I mean, I'm not going to go into details of this. People know, obviously, I mean, we, as a Labour councillor, we're not employees, we're kind of self-employed, but we do get some allowances, taxable allowances based on whatever role you take. And also, if you do get elected, ask, or even before you get elected, check out with your employer, if you are employed by an organisation, whether they give something what's called public duty days. Because I think, as you probably gathered from the presentation earlier here tonight and your own knowledge and reading about what it means to be a councillor, you know, it's quite time intensive. And so some employers are able to give what they call public duty days. So this is where you don't need to take your holidays or reorganise your time in such a way. They give you some extra time to actually participate in public duties, which is what being a local councillor actually is. Thank you.